Tell me when I need to start, okay?
We've got people coming in now, joining now. So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. You could give it another minute or so for people to, it takes a minute or so for everyone to come in.
And are you seeing the live stream?
This is welcome live stream starting soon. Val, should I wait till about 7:03 or you want to direct me?
I think you could start.
Great. Welcome to the second DeKalb Dems webinar. Our topic this evening is on what you need to know about the Public Service Commission. Georgia's 2025 election cycle is underway, and it includes this critical race, the Public Service Commission. This election will shape the future of Georgia's energy, utilities, and infrastructure. And the DeKalb Dems know that it's very important for voters to be informed and to every voter to get to the poll and have their voices heard. We have wonderful presenters this evening. Our first presenter is Chastity Malloy. Chastity is a Georgia native, originally from the metro Atlanta area. She currently resides in Savannah. She has extensive knowledge and appreciation of Georgia's environmental history,
We've got people coming in
commitment
now,
to
joining now. So
protecting our
welcome
state's
everyone
natural resources,
joining us.
coupled with her excitement at building broad community alliances, strengthens Georgia's conservation voters statewide. Our second speaker is Patty Duran. Patty recently founded the Georgia Utility Watch, a nonprofit that seeks monopoly reform in Georgia to end the trio of Georgia Power high bills, high turnoff rates, and high profits. Patty lives in Atlanta and has a business degree from College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. Our third speaker is Andrea Young-Jones. Andrea serves as the Government Relations and Public Policy Director for Georgia WAN. Andrea is passionate about improving the quality of life for all Georgia residents and is advocating for environmental justice legislation and considers the combined effect of environmental stressors, socioeconomic stressors, and pre-existing health conditions and how it impacts the permitting and approval process of industrial facilities. Andrea believes that environmental justice is a national concern that touches both rural and urban areas alike. Okay, the first section of our discussion this evening will talk about the key responsibilities and roles of the Public Service Commission. And Chastity Malloy is going to share information about that topic. Chastity?
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Karen, and good evening to everyone who is joining us this tonight, who's tuning in via live stream. We're so grateful to have you all in this space and in this room as we talk about some very critical elections that we have on the ballot this year, and that is the Georgia Public Service Commission election. Next slide, please. So I'm going to jump into and just talk 101 for the start. Let's talk about the key roles and responsibilities for the Public Service Commission, how those terms are structured, and what's at stake in Georgia when it comes to voting in this election this year. Next slide. Next slide. And one more. Fantastic. Okay, so the Georgia Public Service Commission, or PSC, are 5 people who are elected to regulate services provided by investor-owned telecommunications, natural gas, and electric utilities. They also directly regulate the changes in rates that we pay in our bills from Georgia Power as well as Atlanta Gas Light. Just to expand on that a little bit, telecommunications would apply to anybody who has a landline. Natural gas, of course, includes anyone who has gas power utilities in their house, and Georgia Power is a investor-owned utility in Georgia, but it is not the only way that Georgians receive their utilities in the state. We also have EMCs, which are electric membership cooperatives, and some folks pay their utilities through their city, and those are called MEAGs. But one of the most important things that the commission does for electricity is what's called the Integrated Resource Plan, or IRP. It's really kind of a forecast of how much we anticipate our utilities going to cost over the next 3 years. And this is where Georgia Power makes an appeal to the PSC to decide how much they're going to charge us on our bills. That's called a rate, and this is called a rate case. So they decide how much customers pay for it and how much profit the company should make. The PSC also have the power to veto these rate increases. And that's a really important thing to note. They don't have to automatically approve them. The PSC really plays a critical role in shaping Georgia's energy future, from setting utility rates to approving renewable projects. The PSC decisions impact our environment, they impact our economy, and they also impact our everyday lives. Next slide. Here are some of the key responsibilities of the Public Service Commission. As I mentioned just before, they can approve utility rate changes as well as fee structures. And by fee structures, think of that as consumer protections. Do we have humane disconnection policies? How are our utilities restored in the event of inclement weather or widespread power outages? As I mentioned, they also approved Georgia Power's Integrated Resource Plan, which happens every 3 years. This is 2025, and we're actually in the middle of that process right now. We have the second hearings coming up later on this month, and I can talk later about how you can get involved and make your voices heard there too. They also regulate monopoly utilities like Georgia Power. They establish policies that can support renewable energy and energy efficiency. And they can also resolve territorial disputes involving utilities and railroads. This is really good to know if you have a EMC in the state. Just to let you all know that the PSC decisions also impact folks who have electric membership cooperatives, because they also get their power from the same subsidiary, which is called Oglethorpe Power. But the commissioners serve 6-year terms, which I would call relatively long. Those elections are staggered, which ensures continuity on the commission. The candidates have to run in the district, and again, there are 5 that they are wanting to serve in. However, these elections are statewide. I will definitely go into detail on that a little bit later. There is a chair of the commission which rotates, and commissioners make over $120,000 a year. Next slide. So the commission was established to protect residents. The long of the short of it, they're protecting us from high utility bills as well as dangerous energy policies. Dangerous energy policies could be like getting our utilities or getting that energy from dirty sources. That could be coal, that could be, methane, different sources that really kind of ultimately contaminate the environment and are harmful to those who live in close proximity to them. Instead, the Public Service Commission has a pattern of approving all of the expensive projects that Georgia Power has requested. And since 2023, the PSC has voted to increase bills 6 times now, raising our average monthly bill by $43, which if you were to add that up right now would be roughly $500 a year. That might seem like small change to some, but for a lot of folks, that is a lot of money, especially in a time right now of inflation, with the economy being a bit unstable and the cost of everyday living being on the rise right now. Georgia Power is an investor-owned utility, and they are owned by Southern Company, which is a company that racks in billions of dollars in profits every single year. Georgia Power is also the only electricity provider for nearly 3 million households and businesses, and the Georgia Constitution guarantees it a profit. Now, this is not like our cell phones, where if we don't really like the service, we can decide, you know what, I'm going to switch over and I'm going to go to somebody else. If you live in a Georgia Power service area, you're stuck with Georgia Power. We don't have a say in that. The PSC allows Georgia Power to rely on expensive, dangerous fuels such as methane gas and coal, which accounts for 48% and 15% of the state's electricity needs, respectively. These choices matter significantly because, in addition to polluting the communities, Georgians pay the nation's second highest prices in gas-generated power. We also pay the fourth highest in electricity in the nation, too. This is projected to get worse. So currently, there are energy-hungry industries like crypto mining. You might have heard a lot about data centers recently, which are currently being proposed at the cost of tens of billions of dollars. These proposals would collectively use as much electricity as 75% of all Georgia households. Instead of using this demand as an opportunity to invest in safe, lower cost fuels like solar and wind, Georgia's a very hot state, so we have infinite amounts of sunlight that we could get here to generate power from. Georgia Power wants to continue to rely on gas and coal, which increases our power bills in the process, continues to erode away at our climate. And oftentimes, a lot of folks don't know about this. Because public utility regulators often go unnoticed, despite the significant influence that it has on our overall U.S. emissions. Next slide, please. So just a recap and a quick breakdown on some of those increases that I just mentioned. The PSC has allowed Georgia Power to produce unchecked air pollution from coal-fired power plants. One example would be Plant Scheer in Juliet, Georgia, which is owned in part by Georgia Power. It was the #1 carbon polluting power plant in the nation and produced more carbon dioxide than the total energy-related emission in the state of Maine. It continues to be the top polluter and is one of the deadliest in the nation. This also impacts our water pollution from coal ash. So coal ash is a byproduct from burning coal for power. Millions of tons of coal ash are currently being stored in unlined ponds, possibly leaking into our groundwater. And of course, that is a major source for a lot of our ultimately drinking water. And this also increases the energy burden and the cost of our power bills. So when we continue to invest in dirty energy sources, which I will say guarantee a profit, that not only pollutes the air in our waterways, but they're super expensive to operate and very, very expensive to clean up. And that cleanup is also being billed to us as well. So we pay twofold oftentimes. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go into detail on all of this here, but I thought it was very vital and important information for you all to see. Recent Georgia Power bill increases. These are just some examples of the bill increases that have been nonstop over the last few years. This is just the last 5 years alone. And I will highlight that the most recent increase that we all saw was in January of this year. That was an increase of 3.5%, which raised our bills by roughly or almost $6 a month. I'm speaking from personal experience. I have Georgia Power myself. I'm a sole provider of my income in my household. So when these increases happen, and with the continuity and the frequency of them happening and the projection of them happening again, and this is definitely one of those things that I'm paying very close attention to, because there are a lot of folks, and you know them just as well as I do, who live in large households. They often rely on life-saving medical equipment in their homes, which also are needed to generate electricity. They might have fixed incomes. You know, there are many seniors and many folks who rely on several programming and funding that gives credit to them to keep these bills down. But I always say a rate is a rate is a rate. And no matter what your income is, we all pay the exact same rate. And that rate has been leading to that energy burden and has making it very, very tough for folks to stay on top of paying their bills monthly. Next slide. I love this map. What you'll see there on the left are an example of energy burdens here in the state of Georgia. What you see outlined is on the right are Georgia Power Company's service areas. And if you were to do an overlay of this map, it is pretty clear to most folks that you will see in that oftentimes in areas where Georgia Power is the sole electricity provider, there's also a huge increase in the energy burden. And that's really defined as the amount of money a household spends each month on their utilities. The more deeper that purple is, the more people spend. And we know that if anyone falls behind in paying their electricity bill, there's a lot of fees associated with that. You get a late fee. You oftentimes will get a reconnection fee if your electricities are shut off. You could also get evicted if you're a renter because a lot of leases require that you have electricity on in your home operational at all times. So, you know, these burdens are tough. They're really, really tough on folks, and they are potentially costly, not only costly, but also deadly. You know, if you're sitting in a house in Georgia as we lead into the hot summer, you can only imagine just how much heat can accumulate in a home that doesn't have compatible air flowing through it. So that just kind of illustrates that burden via map form, but we know the faces behind those burdens. Next slide. There are 5 commissioners, as I mentioned before, and we have 2 elections on the ballot this year. Districts 2 and District 3 are up for elections beginning in June of this year. That's our special primary for the Public Service Commission. These are those 5 commissioners. You'll see District 2, District 3 are there. The current chairperson is Jason Shaw, who's out of District 1. Next year, we'll have elections for District 4, and then the following year, we'll have elections for the remaining 2 commissioners. But as I said, these are 6-year terms, very, very long time, and several of these commissioners have served many, many terms. I will also note that the commissioners for District 2 and 3, their terms have already lapsed. So we have right now commissioners who are making decisions on our utility bills and our daily lives that have not been elected by us, the members of the public, which is a big problem. And we finally have an opportunity to do something about that this year. Next slide. So the PSC districts, this is how they're created. There are 5. As I mentioned earlier, the Georgia General Assembly created these districts, and you can see them there illustrated on the map. Candidates have to run in the seat that they want to run it. I mean, live in the seat that they want to run in, pardon. However, voting is statewide. So although you see this map and you see these districts, just ignore it. Everybody who's a registered voter in Georgia can vote in the Public Service Commission. That means your cousin down in Albany, your best friend over in Macon, your sister-in-law in Savannah. It doesn't matter. As long as they're a registered voter in Georgia, regardless of this map, they can vote in the Public Service Commission election this year. If you have an EMC, you can vote in the Public Service Commission this year. If you pay your utilities to your city, you can vote in the Public Service Commission. But I will say that these votes are significant. You'll see that District 3 is only 3 counties, Fulton, DeKalb, and Clayton. And these 3 districts alone are the first, 4th, and 6th in population size. I will also note that you can run in a district and still lose the election because, again, they are statewide. Next and last slide. This is just some information about those upcoming elections, you all. I think one of the most important things to do is to make sure that you're registered to vote. A lot of folks say, and they think they're registered to vote. This is a great opportunity to make sure that you've checked. If you haven't already, do so on or before May 19th. Advanced early voting will start at the end of this month on May 27th, the day after Memorial Day, and that will extend through Friday, June the 13th. Election day for the primary is on Tuesday, June the 17th. In the event of a runoff, there are 8 candidates who are running for those 2 seats. So that is possible. That runoff date will be on June the 15th. We'll have our general election in November. And this is a really great opportunity right now, if you've got your phone handy, to take a glimpse at this QR code here. We've got a really great resource that can help you get familiar with the candidates on the ballot. We want to make sure that you're informed when you go to vote, not just we're telling you to go vote. We want to make sure you're aware of who these candidates are, how do they stand, what their platforms are, what do they stand on utilities, what do they stand on environment. You can also print this ballot. You can continue to follow these candidates throughout the election year, and that will always be populated for the upcoming election. Also of note, PSC elections aren't the only ones on the ballot too. So depending on which county you live in, you'll also see information about your local elections. In the event that you have municipal elections or perhaps county elections, you will see all of that on the QR code. It's called Branch. It is free to use. You do not have to create an account to use it. It is nonpartisan, and it's a really, really great tool to make sure that you're prepared when you go and vote. And I think I'm probably at my time. So I will pause now and take some time for any questions anyone might have.
All right, so I was a little late putting up that if you had questions. So Dee Dee Murphy wants to know, she's saying the date for the runoff is wrong. It's not June 15th. Is that correct?
July, it's July 15th. If I misspoke, July 15th is the runoff date.
All right, and Alice Goldberg has a hand up, but I'm not sure if that is correct or not. Alice? Do you know you have your hand up, Alice?
Maybe I'll come back to Alice.
Yeah, she still has.
Okay, now I can see everyone. I'm sorry. I've been trying to figure out so I can see everyone. I'm sorry. I do not have a question. Thank you.
Okay, no worries.
And Jeannie Dufert, you have your hand raised too? Is that an error or?
Yes, in my county, we have a mix of Georgia Power and lots of EMCs, and Georgia Power also controls our lakes. I'm out at Lake Oconee and Lake Sinclair. So a lot of voters are asking me, if I get my electricity from EMCs, why should I care about the PSC? Can you answer that?
Absolutely. And that's a really great question. I think at the end of the day, it really kind of comes down to the fact that EMCs are all getting their energies from the same subsidiary, which is called Oglethorpe Power. And the PSC decides how that energy is how should I put this, distributed amongst the 41 different EMCs in the state. There are also grants and different fundings that are very specific and available through the PSC. For example, expansion in broadband internet. All of those are regulated and determined by the Public Service Commission. So, those are significant impacts that I think would concern me if I had an EMC. Also, I mentioned that they do make decisions in eminent domain cases. I think one of the biggest things I would illustrate too and point out is that, in the event we had major storms last year, Hurricane Helene comes to mind, and we lost many of our, many power lines were down. Georgia Power alone does not come in and fix those lines. They rely heavily on both EMCs and other utility linemen from other states. So that's also an example of why you would want to be concerned with voting if you had an EMC as well.
Thank you so much, Chastity. If you look in the chat section, there's additional information to how to get in touch with Chastity if you have further questions or need additional information about the key responsibilities and roles of the Public Service Commission. Okay, our second section is going to discuss how has the Public Service Commission performed so far, and Patty Duran is going to speak on that topic. Patty?
I'm ready. Next slide. Next two slides, probably. Next one, yeah. So I just want to start with a quick overview of why Georgia Power is a monopoly and where the problem originates from. So in 1890, the Sherman Antitrust Act was passed by Congress because by that time period, there had been so much abuse of monopolies. They have price gouged their customers. They've crushed competition. They've exploited every corner of the business market they could have. If you think about Carnegie Mellon and all of those rich industrial men, this was done to stop that. So they were made illegal across the board in the United States. Monopolies are illegal with one exception, and that is utilities. And the only reason they get an exception is because they must agree to be overseen by the state. And so all states, all 50 states have a state public service commission or a public utility commission, as it's more commonly called. So next slide. So what I want to talk about related to that is that in our state, that our PSC basically provides a veneer of oversight. They do not actually provide any oversight. It is a game, frankly. I'm going to be like, I think Chastity was very professional. Maybe she was a teacher. She was very good at what she did, but I'm going to be a little more provocative because I've never been a teacher, and I can tell you that I'm pretty outraged almost every day. So I'm just going to throw down and just tell you like it is. So some of the problems Chastity already covered, the outrageous bills. She covered some of those huge rate increases. And she covered the fact that they prioritized dirty, expensive energy. Georgia Power was also allowed to build the most expensive power plant ever built on Earth. That's Plant Vogtle, a $36 billion boondoggle. And then they have no concern for climate change. Each commissioner has said something dismissive or behaved disrespectfully to people who come to the commission asking them to reduce gas usage or stop coal plants in one way or another, including telling a couple of people to take your activism to India or China because they clearly don't follow the same beliefs we have here, acting like because they're just starting to have fossil emissions that there's nothing we can do because look, they're in the game too, which is an absurd way to think. Next slide. Regarding outrageous power bills, I want to add to what Chastity said. We pay, she said fourth, it's fourth, fifth, or sixth, depending on the year. Frankly, I think it's first, and I'm waiting for the next ranking of states for utility bills to come out because neither Chastity nor I have that information. We have rate information, but Georgia Power has a lot of costs not in the rates that are on the bills. About half the bill is not in the rates. So we really have to wait for something like NerdWallet or Forbes. There's any number of groups that is able to get bill information, and then they do the rankings, and that's where we show up. But we're top 5, and I have a long career in energy, and one of the most dismaying things to me is when I speak to my colleagues in other states. They're polite to me, they're respectful, they're professional, whatever, but it'll slip out. Like the last time I spoke to one of my colleagues, after he knew it was me on the phone, he said, "So how's the plundering and pillaging going of Georgia? Is Southern Company still doing you guys in?" And of course, I was taken aback, but he is totally right. Yes, I said, they're absolutely plundering the state of Georgia. Next slide. So as she said, they have 6 bill increases in 2 years. This is a stacked bar chart the Atlanta Journal published a couple months ago showing all the rate increases and what they're attributed to. Next slide. And yes, she covered this very well. There's been a lot of harm to Georgians. Southern Company's profits are up in the stratosphere. There's been a lot of backlash and pain online that I saw on Reddit and Nextdoor, Facebook, and then the traditional media picked up on it and they did some stories like this one. You'll see the Ledger Enquirer headline, "Insane and Ridiculous." I just got an email from a woman yesterday. Her normal $300 bill was $650, and she doesn't know what is going on. Well, I do. It's this. Next slide. And this young reporter, a woman named Shay Schrader, did a fantastic piece called well, I don't know what she called it. This is the headline I grabbed off the online image, but it was a television package. She did about a 4-minute, which is a long time for TV. She actually pulled records from Southern Company's earnings reports, compared their profits year over year, which I've never seen a reporter do, and talked in the piece about, and you can see the subheading here that I circled in red. Georgia Power made a staggering $2.5 billion in 2024, an increase in 40%. So that just really lays to rest the lie that Georgia Power needed these rate increases because of grid investments and all that stuff they say. No, they didn't. They wanted the rate increases so they could get these profits. There's no reason a commodity like electrons delivered by a monopoly, not even in a competitive market, should make $2.5 billion in profits. It's an outrage. Next slide. They prioritize expensive, dirty energy. You can see the headline I snagged here from WABE and GRIST, that the data center effort that Georgia Power is recruiting to the state is allowing them to use the guise of, oh, we must have more gas, we must keep our coal plants going, and they sideline solar. We're a very sunny state. Solar should be our top generation choice paired with battery storage, and it's not. Next slide. And that's because fossil fuels are much more profitable than solar plus wind or geothermal or any of the other routine ways that states reduce costs for their customers. Why is it more profitable? Because they have fuels. And gas benefits Southern Company in its numerous 6 subsidiaries: Southern Gas, Atlanta Gas Light, I could name them all. Whereas solar and wind and geothermal, they don't have any fuel costs. Solar's free, wind is free, geothermal is heat from the planet, and so on. So this is what's happening. Next slide. So these are a couple of good headlines I wanted to snag. The Sierra Club did a good press release on the bizarre decision last September that the commission granted Georgia Power for them to build a whole new biomass plant. Why? Because the timber industry wanted it. And then there's another headline over the same rate hearing. And this proceeding was so shocking to me because the commission allowed Georgia Power to redact or hide the cost of this biomass plant. So we know it was in the billions with a B, and we know it was more than 2 billion because it had an S. That's all we were allowed to know. Yet we're paying for it, and it's not a competitive market. Why aren't we allowed to know the cost? Because they want to hide the price gouging. And this was so, I mean, it was 79 megawatts of energy. Like, if you know anything about energy, that is a joke. That is such a tiny amount for them to charge this high. And the commission, of course, they knew they were being bad. A couple of commissioners said, well, we know this is expensive, but it's a good thing, you know, for the wood basket, which I've never heard that term before, the wood basket of Georgia, because, you know, truckers need jobs, you know, they got to put food on the table. And I'm thinking, can't the timber industry pay for their truckers? Why are Georgia Power customers paying for this outrageous biomass plant that's going to pollute and cost us way more money than we should be paying? It's all about profits. So next slide. So Plant Vogtle is another outrage. You could see from the Associated Press headline that it was 7 years late. It was $17 billion over cost. The actual cost was $36 billion, which is insane. And you know, there were so many problems. There's not time to get into it, but it was an absolute scandal. Next slide. And I wanted you to see this. This was really hard fought for me to find this. I've downloaded it in case they decide to disappear it. But this is a press release that I found floating on the internet where in 2016, Georgia Power said the new units will put downward pressure on rates, which is not a thing, by the way. They just make that up. It sounds good, downward pressure, and to deliver long-term savings. And if you look in the line above it, I didn't highlight it. You'll see at the beginning of the third line from the bottom where they said the rate impact would be 2.5%. Next slide. This is what the rate impact actually was, more than 10 times more, 23.7%. And I put the tariffs there for the nerds among you if you want to see actually how the rates increases flow through the tariff. Next slide. This 11, now Chastity was correct when she said it was 7.56 billion. I'm saying it's 11 because I'm including the financing costs that we have to pay for that 7.5 billion. And either way, whether it's 7.5 or 11, it's the largest rate increase in state history. And if you look on the bottom left, those little icons, it's actually the largest rate increase in US history. Next slide. And then the last section in my overview of how the Georgia Commission has been doing for us, their lack of concern for climate change is absolutely astonishing. Next slide. They expand gas and coal in great amounts while they block solar in numerous ways. They block commercial warehouse solar. This is an article The Current wrote about why is it that all these warehouses all scattered across the state with all these flat roofs that are white, reflecting energy, the sun, could be keeping that energy and using it for that business. And the reason they don't is because the businesses can't make it financially work because of Georgia Power's policies and fees. Next slide. They block rooftop solar. There was a huge campaign 2 years ago to expand net metering. You can see what happened by this headline where the mayor of Atlanta called the decision disappointing, that in fact, there was no expansion of net metering. Thus, we're in 43rd place for solar. Next slide. And they block community solar. Georgia Power is adamantly opposed and they get what they want. Next slide. So I think this is my last slide, and this is just really distressing and disturbing to me because as we know, 2024 was the warmest year on record. January of 2025 was the warmest January on record, and we are going to exceed 1.5 degrees of Celsius. That actually happened in November of 2024. Next slide. I guess I did have something else, maybe a couple more slides, but research shows commissioners ignore public comment. This one on the upper right, the hundreds plead for less fossil fuels. That was a 2-month investigation by a young reporter out of Columbus, Georgia, where they looked at literally 1,000 comments, hours of video review, hundreds of, like 600 email comments, and studied all the comments, categorized them, and determined that commissioners actually ignored all of them. Next slide. And yeah, these are my last slides because they ignore public comments. They're shoveling money to Georgia Power hand over fist. And a big part of the reason is because they're corrupted by money. This is Tim Echols' campaign disclosure report where I highlighted in yellow all the money he takes from regulated industries. You can see there's almost no white there because it's almost all regulated industries he takes money from. Next slide. And then the GCV did this slide of what they call, it looks like the conversion didn't capture right, the headline's off a little bit, but it says Johnson and Echols influence money, showing how much money of their total amount is from a regulated industry. And you can see Fitz, almost all of it. Tim Echols, 3/4 of it. There is no credible claim that they are unbiased and regulating in the public interest with this level of money that they're taking from people that they should be regulating. And I think that's it for me. I think I'm happy to take questions, but I believe Andre is going to cover what some of the hoped for solutions are to these really big problems.
Thank you so much, Patty. There are a couple of questions. I think this question by Darlene will answer in the next section about how the winners are determined. Leave, I think your question will also be perhaps addressed, but I'll bring it up now so Patty can respond. How do we stop the data centers?
Yeah, there really isn't a way to stop the data centers. If we had better regulation, you know, Andre and I worked really hard in the last session. There was one bill in particular, Senate Bill 34, that would have probably stopped data centers had it passed. And that is by requiring them to pay all the cost or substantially all the cost related to the new generation being built. and the new transmission being built to serve their needs. But that bill was killed by Senator Matt Brass out of Noonan. I'm kind of on the warpath for him. I've been posting on my social media platforms how much money he took from Georgia Power in exchange for throwing us under the bus by not letting that bill get a vote. But yeah, Andrea will cover more of that.
Jeannie has her hand raised. Jeannie, is that a mistake or you have a question? Not sure. Okay.
Yeah, we keep hearing that Georgia is the one of the best states to do business in. And you know, I looked into this rate question, and residential rate is way higher than business rates.
Yeah.
Are we unusual in that case? In other words, is even a larger burden of all this cost that the Georgia Power is being allowed to charge, are they shifting even more of it than normal onto residential, or are we kind of in a normal world of low cost for industrial?
It's normal for industrials to be lower than residential, but not this much lower. And I have a great table that I've created to show that Georgia's industrial rates are 60% below the national average for industrial rates. So you couple that with these incredible tax breaks that the state of Georgia gives data centers, no wonder they come here. They'd be fools not to come here. They pay rock bottom electricity prices, low to no taxes, and Georgia Power is unrolling the red carpet for them. So I think that the problem is there is a hidden cost subsidy, and the whole idea that we're the best state to do business just completely ignores the fact that we're the #1 state for residential disconnections or shutoffs. Actually Georgia Power, I don't know about state, but Georgia Power has the highest level of disconnects per their residential customers of any utility in the state, in the nation, and that is shameful. The energy burden that Chastity covered, shameful. There's a lot of things we're the worst in, and having businesses make money hand over fist is not a win, in my opinion.
Okay, Patty, thank you. Thank you so much for this plethora
You're
of
welcome. My
information.
pleasure.
As you can see, her contact information is also in the chat. So, for additional questions, don't hesitate. Now we're going to move on to section 3, and Andrea is going to talk to us about what reforms could improve the Public Service Commission. Andrea?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this discussion. So my section is what reforms could improve the Public Service Commission and the Public Service Commission race. You can go to the next slide. Next slide. Okay, so one of the questions that was asked and when we were planning our presentations was, what impact would more citizen participation have in PSC proceedings? And Chastity and Patty kind of went over some of the things that the PSC does in terms of their proceedings, the IRP, the rate case, and the PSC committee meetings. But if we had greater citizen participation, that would bring much more needed transparency, accountability, and balance to the Public Service Commission. One of the things that I learned is that you teach people how to treat you. And so if we had better public participation in the Public Service Commission, then one of the things that would come for that is that public service commissioners would be aware that the public is aware of what they're doing, and they would probably make better decisions, especially decisions that are geared towards the cost of energy. Next slide, please. So when citizen input can spotlight real world concerns such as rising energy costs, which Patty talked about in terms of the outcry that came out during the summer with the increase of Georgia Power bills, also service reliability in rural areas and communities, them not being able to get services. And Chastity brought up a good point in terms of looking at EMCs or MEACs and seeing how they are able to provide services for their service for their customers, and how Georgia Power and how the PSC controls that aspect of it. So for people who don't have Georgia Power and have other types of utilities, it's not just Georgia Power, so it's not just your energy, it's also your accessibility to energy, as well as your ability also to do other things, telecommunications, and then also how it impacts your health, your environmental impact. All of that comes into play in terms of the PSC. So when more voices are at the table, especially from communities that are historically underrepresented, it pushes the commission to weigh in economic justice and equitable access issues, instead of looking at the technical and financial considerations of the regulatory businesses that they are supposed to be have the authority of overseeing. So stronger public engagement can help counter misinformation as well, and also can build trust amongst commission's decisions, or will be able to counter what the commission is saying is saying that might not be true. So if we have more more citizens involved, then we would be able to actually kind of confront that misinformation, because we would actually have people who are there who actually can come to and who are advocating not just for their particular area in terms of their own community, but also statewide. So in short, more citizen participation would make the PSC more responsive, representative, and effective in serving the people of Georgia. Next slide, please. So what changes in state law can citizens advocate for? And that's what Patty was talking about that I was going to bring up. I broke this down on subheadings. So the first one is modernizing oversight. If you see, there's a check by this legislation. This legislation was actually introduced. HB 653 was introduced in the state legislature, and that was to rename the Public Service Commission. This was sponsored by Representative Jordan Ridley. And one of the reasons why this legislation was introduced is because we realized that people don't know what actually a Public Service Commission is. Service is very vague. That's a very vague word. What does that mean? But utility is not. So if we had Public Utility Commission, then we believe that people would basically understand, okay, that is your duty. That is basically what you're supposed to do. You are supposed to make sure that our utilities are charging us in a way that is fair and reasonable. And so we believe that a name change would break this disconnect that voters have about the Public Service Commission and accurately reflect its responsibilities in regulating essential utilities. This bill did not advance, but it could come back in the next legislative session in 2026. Then we have SB 94, which was establishing a Consumer Utility Council. This legislation was introduced by Senator Chuck Hofstadter. This legislation aimed to reestablish the Consumer Utility Council. The legislature created the Utility Council to represent consumer interests years and years ago, but it paused the funding for the position in 2008 during the Obama era to cut costs during the Great Recession. This bill advanced in the Senate Rules Committee, but was never brought to the floor by the Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones. Also, this legislation was introduced in 2023 legislative session, and it passed the Senate unanimously. All right, so this legislation was introduced the year before, passed unanimously, was introduced the next time, and it did not make it to the floor. The bill failed in the House Agriculture and Consumer Affairs Committee in 2023. Next slide. Then we also have modernizing oversight. Patty mentioned SB 34, which is the data center funding bill, also sponsored by Senator Hofstadter. This required data centers to pay the full cost of new generation built to serve their needs. But unfortunately, this bill did not pass out of the Rules Committee. And then we have HB 446, securing discovery rights for interveners. And this has to deal with the IRP, the Integrated Resource Plan. So the Integrated Resource Plan is Georgia Power's time to come before the PSC to share what their plans are for the next 3 or 20 years to resource energy. And they basically, it's like a court proceeding. There's discovery, there's testimony, there's cross-examination, it's all that. Well, unfortunately, interveners such as nonprofits, such as Georgia One, we don't have discovery rights. So we cannot get the same information from Georgia Power that or from other entities that that would help us be able to be better informed and be able to ask better questions, and also to inform the public. And so this legislation, also introduced by Jordan Ridley, would help correct and create that balance. And Georgia is the only state in the nation where advocates and consumers representatives lack discovery rights during PSC proceedings. And then at the bottom, I have this arrow that goes in. This is basically kind of like something that we would like to happen, that we don't have legislation for this yet, but we believe that commissioners must make public hearings accessible, not just downtown Atlanta during the weekdays. Next slide, please. Okay, now the next subheading is empowering energy consumers. Again, this is legislation that was introduced this past legislative session. This is the Georgia Homegrown Solar Act. This was introduced by Representative Beth Camp and Senator Jason Navarrete. These companion bills actually followed what happened last legislative session when the Homegrown Solar Act was introduced before. They created a study committee on the bill to basically educate lawmakers and also engage with consumers about how they would want solar power to be implemented in Georgia. It was a summer-long study committee. We were hoping that this the legislation, once it was introduced, it would pass, but unfortunately, Georgia Power blocked the residential solar at the PSC and at the state legislature. Georgia Power has about 35 registered lobbyists at the Georgia State Legislature. So we will continue to fight for solar power. We know that one of the reasons why this legislation was stopped because there is bipartisan support for this legislation. If you look at all the bills I've just introduced, they're introduced by Republicans. Now they're introduced by Republicans and Republicans are in power, but this shows that there is bipartisanship support for legislation that would help us in terms of making our energy more affordable and addressing some reforms to make the PSC more balanced. Also, we would like and eventually to allow customers to access their smart meter data. If you have a smart meter, you can unlock energy savings and benefits in order to shop around. But unfortunately, that information is not available. You can't get your smart meter data. So that's another thing that we want to try to do in the state legislature. Next slide, please. So the next one is corporate accountability and reform. Now, we don't have bills for this legislation, but again, this goes back to us wanting to, in the future, begin that process in terms of engaging with legislators to get this information, to get some legislation introduced in the state legislature to address. We want to restructure Georgia Power's compensation model to be performance-based rather than profit-driven. The more they spend, the more they earn. So of course, it would incentivize them to do more, even to overdo it, because that's how they earn profit. But if they can earn their profit through performance-based measures, looking at how they are able to lower energy costs, looking at how they are able to reduce the number of households that have had disconnect notices, also how they resource renewable energy and how they improve people's access to that resource, they can get compensated that way. Another thing that we believe that should happen is that we should ban donations from entities with business before the commission within a specified time frame. Now, this will be a little tricky because according to the Supreme Court and Citizens United, money is speech. So if we restrict people's money, then we restrict their freedom of expression to give money for particular acts that they would like the representative to do. So what we would recommend is that if you do plan on having matters brought before the Public Service Commission, that you in that time frame would not be able to donate to commissioners. This speaks to what's happening with the Sandusville Railroad, where the PSC approved in domain of taking away the land of residents in Hancock County for the Sandusville Railroad. Usually with eminent domain, you acquire or take proper land for public purposes, not for private purposes. And so this speaks to whether, in terms of the current PSC commissioners, whether, there's one thing for something to be legal, there's another thing for it to be ethical. So just because I can do something doesn't mean I should do something. And that's what you basically should look for when you are looking at PSC candidates. Next slide, please. So then we have changes in tax policy adjustments, and this goes back to the data center. So we believe that we should place a moratorium on data center tax credits that exist to evaluate their long-term impacts on the surrounding environment and electricity rates, because we know that data centers use a lot of energy, they use a lot of power, and they use a lot of water. Now, lawmakers passed HB 1192. This was Republicans and Democrats in 2024 legislative session that would have paused the tax credits for power consuming data centers and would create a commission to study their vast energy use. But Governor Kemp vetoed that legislation. So that speaks to the idea that, we believe that there is more commonality and there is more consensus on what we would like to have happen at the PSC. And we know that the state, that there are legislators at the state level in both chambers that want to rein in the PSC. And so we believe that some of this legislation that had come forth or will come forth would win. But unfortunately, there's a leadership issue. There's a leadership issue at the State House, and there's also a leadership issue at the PSC, because the PSC could do some of this stuff. They don't have to, they are duly elected commissioners. They have the authority to do some of this stuff. They don't have to, they can choose, they don't have to be forced to by state legislature, but the state legislature come in and can guide them. And again, we teach people how to treat us. And so the state legislature can make sure that the PSC commissioners treat ratepayers and utility consumers how they should be treated in terms of ensuring that they are not being exploited for their energy needs. Next slide, please. So how would voting in the Public Service Commission elections impact the decisions that the Public Service Commission makes? Well, voting in Public Service Commission is the most direct way that you can influence how utility decisions are made in our state, right? We treat people how to treat us. So if we don't show up and vote, then they're going to act like we don't vote, right? But the Public Service Commissions, they set rates. We pay for electricity and gas. They decide which energy projects get approved. So if there's no renewable energy or there's not enough renewable energy sourcing, they're the reason why. They shape policies that affect everything from renewable energy expansion to environmental protection. So when citizens vote, they help choose leaders who reflect their values. If we value renewable energy, we value low-cost energy, then we will vote for that, and we will vote in that manner. We should elect commissioners who are accountable to voters rather than beholden to powerful utility companies. And we need to shift that balance of power by voting. So in short, voting in PSC elections is not just about picking names on the ballot. It's about shaping the future of Georgia's energy system. That is why I really appreciate Karen giving us an opportunity to list the amount of policies and legislation that has come up in the state legislature. So you will be able to be informed. You can ask if you go to forums or any types of you meet candidates about where they stand on some of these issues. Next slide, please. So also citizens can start by closely examining a candidate's track record. If you want to determine what candidate to vote for, that's what you look at, their track record. Now let me say there's a note in the left-hand corner there that basically says that Georgia's PSC commissioners' votes are not recorded, right? So any issues that come before the PSC they have to vote on, they don't record that. So you can't go like you can to the General Assembly and you can look and see who voted on what legislation, who voted or who didn't vote, or who was absent or who abstained. You can't see that at the Public Service Commission. So you might want to ask the current commissioners and the candidates if they would be willing to support posting commissioner votes on matters before the PSC on the official website. But you also want to look to who's donating to their campaign. Candidates heavily funded by utility companies that Patty mentioned, or industry groups may be more inclined to favor those interests. Next slide, please. So also pay attention to their positions on key issues like energy rates, clean energy investments, protections for vulnerable communities, and transparency in Public Service Commission's decisions. So the legislation that was listed and provided are good ways you can use it and frame it what makes you more comfortable, but that gives you some information, some power, and that'll allow you also to be able to be more informed in terms of and have a direct focus on what it is that you want to see happen at the PSC and where that candidate would stand on that legislation. Next slide, please. So finally, as I mentioned, attend candidate forums, read their policy platforms, and ask and ask direct questions about how they plan to balance public interest with industry pressures. One of the things that you also need to keep in mind here is that I know we talked a lot about Georgia Power, but one of the things that why we talk so much about Georgia Power, of course, Georgia Power is a monopoly, and it's how basically it's one of the biggest entities that resources energy, and it affects us all, not just in terms of your power bills, but how they resource energy. And in terms of using it, you either doing fossil fuels or are using renewable energy. But also Georgia Power customers should have representation on the commission. Not one commissioner is a Georgia Power customer. And that matters, right? Because if if it's easier, to pass off costs to people that you might not have to bear the burden for. Also, regulated entities can donate to events. So one of our commissioners currently does a road tour that every session, every year, where they go around and they meet with community groups within the state of Georgia, and that's great. That's wonderful. But that's one thing to do a road tour and talk about, some of the things that you're doing. But then you turn around and you vote for things that that contribute to some of the things that are hurting people or are causing hardship. So it's good to kind of understand how you weigh those things. Your voting, how you vote for particular issues before the Public Service Commission matters more than what you do in terms of your community outreach. They both have to match. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go into great detail here because Chastity did such a great job about upcoming election information. But if you can see there's some dates if you wanted to have it. I don't know if this presentation will be sent out, but here it is again if for information about marking your calendars for what's happening for the elections in terms of special state primary and then all state races. Next slide, please. Thank you. That's it for me. Thank you so very much. I look forward to answering any questions that people have. And I really, really appreciate you all giving us this opportunity to speak with you and share this information. I hope it was informative.
Andrea, thank you. Thank you so much. There are a few questions. I think you dealt with Lee's question a little bit about, that we won't be able to stop the data centers, but we could probably, I don't know if you want to speak to that, how we could, you mentioned it, how we could legislate and
we could stop the data center tax credits, and I'm going to let my colleagues give them an opportunity to kind of chime in too. But we could basically stop the tax credits. That the whole idea of the tax credits was to say that the data centers would create jobs, right? But the jobs that are created are probably in the beginning when there's a lot of construction going on happening. But then after that, the data center basically is a big computer. It runs itself and it pulls a lot of energy. So the jobs are not sustainable. They do not, they don't maintain, they don't last, right? And so that's what the state wanted to look at. And so that could slow them down. Another thing that could slow down data centers is basically making them pay for their own generation, right? And so that's one thing. So there's things that you can do administratively, right? And then on top of that, like I mentioned in terms of HB 1192, that was vetoed by the governor. For a legislation to pass the General Assembly, it takes a lot, right? You have to have both chambers in agreement. And on top of that, you have to have both political parties on the same page. And so to get that to the point where that legislation passed both chambers and got our way to the governor and was vetoed, speaks to the need to not just think about voting as to you're just representative. You have to think about it in a more broad aspect of it. The state, the leadership, the lieutenant governor and the governor are elected statewide, and so are PSC commissioners. They are elected statewide. That is the leadership. And so if they are not on board, then we will not get it done. We will not get it passed, no matter how many times it passes the state legislature. It will not pass. We would have to have a veto-proof majority in order for that to happen. I don't know if that will happen in 2025 or in 2026.
So there was another question in there about the commissioners have to win by 51%. Is that correct?
Without getting a runoff, I believe so, but I will have my colleagues chime in.
I think it's 50% plus one. But
Patty,
that might have been
right.
what they meant.
That's right, 50% plus one.
And then Howard Katzman has a hand raised. Howard, do you have a question? Or is that a mistake?
No, I was just going to say that it's easy to pass legislation if you know the governor's going to veto it.
That's-
I mean,
I think
you
the
know these guys all
legislature,
talk to each other.
I think the legislature intended to pause the tax breaks. I don't think it was a nefarious intent. I think they knew there were big problems and now the problems are here.
That's
I know,
encouraging. Thank you.
I know this isn't a question, but I just want to interject just briefly. I want to correct one thing Chastity said, and it's a really weird thing that few people realize. And that is that actually there are 2 PSC elections next year, not one, because the seat that is being run for now for District 3, the in town, this is just a 1-year term because it is filling a vacancy. That candidate that wins or whoever's in that seat has to run again next year. So it's kind of weird.
Thank you for pointing that out, Patty. You're right. That was the result of another legislative bill, HB 1312, that deferred these elections that should have taken place last year.
That was unconstitutional.
Correct.
Yeah, we
It's in
think
the
it
Georgia
is.
Constitution that you have to hold PSC elections every 6 years. And, they did not do that. And when we look at what's happening when we vote in 2026 and in 2027, 2028, you will have some commissioners that would have served 8-year terms.
Well, Commissioner Eccles is actually on his 9th year without an election. So if Trump wanted to serve 2 full presidency terms, he really didn't need to do a stop the vote, stop the steal campaign. He could have just been on the commission. He could have served 9 years. It's ridiculous.
So I really, really, really thank you so much for sharing so much information with us this evening. And the whole recording of this webinar will be on our Facebook page. I think I'm saying it right. Lawrence, I hope I'm saying it right.
Facebook and YouTube and website.
Right. So I encourage all of the attendees to please take this information and share it in your communities because knowledge is power.
Yes, it is.
And, knowing the truth and getting out and voting, sometimes people say, oh, it doesn't make a difference. I think this evening we just reinforced how very, very, very important it is for you to vote, how it impacts your everyday life. Let me remind you that our next webinar will be June the 11th at 7 o'clock. And we really want to stop the violence, find out why so many Georgia children die from gun violence. So I hope you will put that on your calendar. Please contact our speakers to, answer questions and share information about the upcoming Public Service Commission. And thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday evening. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Should we hop off, Karen?
I think so. I think I'm
Okay.
gonna close.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you.